I am Sandra, 67 years old, and my life changed when my son Michael bought his first house in California. I saved for months to surprise him with a visit, flying from Boston to San Francisco with a heart full of motherly pride. When I arrived at his stunning new home, I expected joy. Instead, his first words left me cold. "Mom, don't tell the neighbors who you really are." If you're watching this right now, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop it in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about family secrets that changed everything. After my husband Tom passed away, when Michael was just 8 years old, I raised our son alone in our modest Boston apartment. Michael was always special, quiet and introspective, with a mind that seemed to absorb everything around him. He excelled in school without much effort, particularly in mathematics. While other parents struggled to get their children to finish homework, I often found Michael solving complex equations just for fun. His teachers called him gifted, but socially, he struggled to connect with others his age. He lives in his own world, his fifth-grade teacher told me during a parent-teacher conference. But what a fascinating world it must be. I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Days as an administrative assistant at a law firm, and evenings waiting tables at a local restaurant. The schedule was grueling, but seeing Michael thrive made every exhausting moment worthwhile. I remember falling asleep over bills at our kitchen table, only to wake with a blanket draped over my shoulders and a cup of tea made by my thoughtful son. "Mom, you work too hard," he would say, his young face serious beyond his years. "It's all for you, sweetheart," I would reply, meaning every word. When Michael was accepted to Stanford with a partial scholarship, I felt like all our sacrifices had finally paid off. Still, even with financial aid, the costs were overwhelming. I took out a second mortgage on our small condo and picked up weekend shifts. The day I drove him to the airport, I hugged him tighter than ever before. "Make me proud," I whispered. "I will," he promised. "One day, I'll pay you back for everything." During college, Michael transformed from my shy boy into a confident young man. He studied computer science and business, thriving in the competitive atmosphere. Our phone calls became less frequent as he immersed himself in his new world of coding competitions and startup pitches. When he graduated with honors, I sat in the audience, bursting with pride, though I noticed he seemed slightly embarrassed by my enthusiastic cheering and drugstore corsage. After graduation, Michael landed a job at a tech startup in San Francisco. The salary wasn't impressive by Silicon Valley standards, but it was more money than our family had ever seen. He sent me a portion of each paycheck for the first year, insisting on helping with my mortgage despite my protests. As years passed, our communications became increasingly sporadic. Michael would call on holidays and my birthday, but our conversations grew shorter. He was always rushing somewhere important, speaking in technical jargon I couldn't understand. When I asked about his life, his answers became vague. "Work is intense. The company might get acquired soon." Or, "The project is confidential, Mom, but it could be big." I told myself this was normal. My son was building his own life. Still, I missed the days when he would tell me everything. Then, 3 weeks ago, Michael called out of the blue. "Mom, I bought a house," he announced, his voice brimming with excitement I hadn't heard in years. "A house in San Francisco. How can you afford that?" I asked, knowing the astronomical real estate prices. "Things have been going really well," he said vaguely. A few investments paid off. I wish you could see it. That casual wish planted a seed in my mind. I hadn't seen Michael in nearly 2 years. I had some savings and plenty of unused vacation days. What if I surprised him? I spent the next week planning my secret trip. I booked flights, requested time off work, and arranged for my neighbor to water my plants. I splurged on a handcrafted quilt as a housewarming gift, remembering how Michael always complained about being cold as a child. The night before my flight, I tried calling Michael to casually ask about his schedule without revealing my plans. He didn't answer. I left a cheerful voicemail mentioning I might be hard to reach for a few days due to some maintenance work in my building. It wasn't exactly a lie. My apartment was scheduled for plumbing repairs the following week. As my plane soared across the country, I gazed out the window at the patchwork landscape below, imagining Michael's face when he opened his door to find me standing there. Would he laugh, cry, pull me into one of his increasingly rare hugs? I wondered about his new house. What style was it? Had he decorated it himself? Or was it filled with the minimalist furniture that seemed popular with young professionals? I pictured modest but tasteful rooms, perhaps with some empty spaces, waiting to be filled over time. Michael had always been practical with money, a trait I had worked hard to instill in him. My excitement was tinged with a slight unease. Michael hadn't answered my calls for 3 days. I told myself he was just busy, settling into his new place, perhaps dealing with the usual homeowner challenges of utilities and furniture deliveries. Still, a small voice whispered that something wasn't quite right. I pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the adventure ahead. The California sunshine felt glorious after leaving Boston's early spring chill. I collected my luggage and hailed an Uber, showing the driver the address Michael had texted me weeks earlier. As we pulled away from the airport, I gazed out at the palm trees and colorful stucco buildings, so different from my familiar New England landscape. "First time in San Francisco?" the driver asked, catching my wide-eyed expression in the rearview mirror. "First time in 20 years, I replied. "I'm visiting my son. He just bought his first house." "That's quite an accomplishment around here," the driver whistled. "Hope he got a good deal." As we drove away from the city center, the urban landscape gradually transformed. Modest apartments gave way to increasingly larger homes with manicured lawns. After about 40 minutes, we turned into a neighborhood that took my breath away. Massive houses sat behind ornate gates, many with circular driveways, and luxury cars parked outside. "Are you sure this is the right address?" I asked, double-checking the text from Michael. "Atherton area. Yes, this is it." The driver confirmed his tone, suddenly respectful. "Your son must be doing very well for himself." "He works in tech," I said weakly, feeling disoriented. This neighborhood seemed far beyond what Michael could afford on the modest salary he had mentioned during our infrequent conversations. Had he received a massive promotion he hadn't told me about? We pulled up to a large Spanish-style home with terracotta roof tiles and an immaculate front garden. A fountain bubbled cheerfully in the center of a circular driveway where a black Tesla was parked. My Uber driver whistled low under his breath. "Nice place," he commented, helping me with my suitcase. "Your son hit the jackpot." I thanked him and stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the house in disbelief. This was no starter home for a young professional. This was a multi-million-dollar estate. I pulled out my phone to call Michael, but once again got his voicemail. As I wheeled my suitcase toward the front gate, I noticed a man tending to some rose bushes along the fence. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and gardening gloves. "Excuse me," I called out. "Is this Michael Lawson's house?" The gardener straightened up, studying me curiously. "You mean Mr. Whitmore?" "Yes, this is his residence." "Whitmore?" I repeated, confused. "No, I'm looking for Michael Lawson. This is the address he gave me." The gardener shrugged. "The owner is Mr. James Whitmore. Perhaps there's a mistake. Maybe I have the wrong address," I stammered, pulling out my phone to double-check. The house number matched exactly what Michael had sent me. "Does a young man live here? About 30 years old? Dark hair? Brown eyes?" Recognition dawned on the gardener's face. "Ah, yes. That's Mr. Whitmore. He moved in about a month ago." My confusion deepened. Why would Michael use a different name? Before I could question the gardener further, my phone buzzed with a text from my son. "At home all day. Call when you want to chat." Taking a deep breath, I approached the intercom at the gate and pressed the button. After a moment, Michael's voice came through the speaker. "Hello, Michael, it's Mom," I said, unable to keep the excitement from my voice, despite my confusion. There was a long pause. "Mom, where are you?" "I'm outside your house. I wanted to surprise you." Another pause, this one even longer. Then, without another word, the gate began to slide open. I walked up the curved driveway, admiring the lush landscaping and elegant architecture. The front door swung open before I reached it, and there stood my son. He wore designer clothes I didn't recognize, his hair styled differently than I remembered. But what struck me most was his expression. Instead of joy at this surprise reunion, his face registered shock, then something that looked alarmingly like fear. "Mom," he said tensely, "what are you doing here?" Not exactly the greeting I had imagined during my cross-country flight. "Surprise." I tried to sound cheerful, holding up the gift-wrapped quilt. "You said you wished I could see your new house, so here I am." Michael glanced over his shoulder, then back at me, before stepping outside and partially closing the door behind him. "You should have called first," he said, his voice low. "This isn't a good time." My smile faltered. "I wanted to surprise you. Are you not happy to see me?" Something in my expression must have reached him, because his face softened slightly. He gave me a quick, stiff hug. "Of course I'm happy to see you. It's just unexpected." He glanced around the neighborhood, then back at me. "Come inside quickly." As I stepped past him into the foyer, the grandeur of the interior stunned me into silence. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, a crystal chandelier that must have cost more than my entire condo. The furniture looked straight out of a luxury magazine, with not a single item out of place. "Michael," I finally managed, "this is incredible. How can you afford all this?" He took my suitcase, avoiding my gaze. "Like I said, investments paid off. I got a big promotion, too." "But this house must cost millions," I persisted. "The market timing was perfect," he said vaguely. "Water, coffee. You must be tired after your flight." He led me to a gourmet kitchen with gleaming stainless steel appliances and stone countertops. As he busied himself with an elaborate espresso machine, I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "The gardener called you Mr. Whitmore?" I said casually. Michael froze for a split second before resuming his task. "Professional name. Easier for clients to remember than Lawson." "You never mentioned changing your name." "Just for business. Not legally changed. Marketing strategy." His clipped answers were so unlike the thoughtful, detailed explanations my son usually gave. As he handed me an espresso in a delicate porcelain cup, he leaned close and whispered words that sent a chill through me. "Mom, don't tell the neighbors who you really are." I nearly dropped the espresso cup. "Excuse me." Michael glanced nervously toward the large windows overlooking the backyard, as though afraid someone might be watching us. "Just follow my lead if we run into anyone," he said quietly. "Say you're my aunt visiting from Chicago, Carol Johnson." "Your aunt?" I echoed, feeling like I had stepped into someone else's life. "Michael, what's going on? Why would I pretend not to be your mother?" He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "It's complicated, Mom. I've established a certain image here. People think I come from a different background." "What background?" I asked, setting down my cup with a firm clink against the saucer. "Old money. East Coast finance family. It helps with my business connections." I stared at my son, this stranger in expensive clothes, standing in a house that should have been far beyond his means. What had happened to my honest, hard-working boy? "Show me around," I said, finally deciding to reserve judgment until I understood more. Michael gave me a hurried tour of the main floor. Everything was immaculate, looking more like a showroom than a lived-in home. There were no personal photographs, no mementos, or signs of the Michael I knew. The living room featured original artwork that even I could tell was valuable. The dining room held a table that could seat 16 people under another crystal chandelier. "Do you entertain often?" I asked, running my hand over the polished mahogany. "Business dinners. Networking is essential in my field." When we reached the curved staircase leading to the second floor, Michael gestured vaguely upward. "Bedrooms up there, home office, nothing interesting." "I'd like to see your office," I said, already placing my foot on the first step. Michael moved quickly to block my path. "It's a mess right now. Confidential client information everywhere. Industry regulations, you understand." "What about where I'll be sleeping?" "Guest room is being renovated. I'll set up the sofa bed in the den for you." He checked his watch. "How long were you planning to stay?" The question stung. I thought perhaps a week, if that's not too imposing. "A week," he repeated, looking distressed. "Right, that should be fine." As we stood awkwardly in the foyer, his phone buzzed. Michael glanced at it, and his expression changed. "I need to take this. Business call. Make yourself comfortable in the kitchen. There's food in the fridge." He disappeared down a hallway, speaking in low, urgent tones. I heard fragments. "Unexpected complication. Yes, my mother. No, she doesn't. Won't be a problem." While Michael was occupied, I wandered into what appeared to be a study off the main living room. Unlike the staged perfection of the rest of the house, this room showed signs of actual use. A laptop sat open on a desk, its screen dark. Files and papers were arranged in neat stacks. My eyes were drawn to a framed photo on the wall, the only personal image I'd seen so far. It showed Michael standing between an older couple at what appeared to be a charity gala. All three wore formal attire and expensive smiles. I had never seen these people before in my life. When Michael returned, he found me studying this photograph. "Who are these people?" I asked. "The Whitmores," he said after a slight hesitation. "Family friends who've been mentoring me." "Mentoring you in what exactly?" Michael's phone buzzed again before he could answer. He glanced at it and his face tightened. "They're coming over," he muttered. "Who?" "The neighbors. They saw your Uber arrive." He gripped my shoulders, his expression intense. "Mom, please, just for tonight, you're Aunt Carol from Chicago. You run a small art gallery. You're divorced, no children. Can you do that for me?" Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Michael straightened his already perfect posture and plastered on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Not a word about Boston or your real life, he whispered, then strode to answer the door. I heard effusive greetings exchanged in the foyer, followed by Michael leading a well-dressed couple into the living room. The woman wore diamonds at her ears and throat that caught the light from the chandelier. The man had the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge. James, darling, we saw a visitor arrive and couldn't resist welcoming them properly, the woman said, her voice cultured and smooth. The Atherton community is like family after all. James. She had called my son James. Diana William. This is my Aunt Carol, Michael said smoothly. She's visiting from Chicago for a few days. How lovely, Diana exclaimed, extending a manicured hand. Carol, welcome to Atherton. We're just 3 houses down. William and I have taken your nephew under our wing since he moved in. Such a brilliant young man. I shook her hand automatically, mind racing to keep up with this charade. Thank you. It's a beautiful neighborhood. The best in the Bay Area, William agreed, his gaze assessing. Your nephew tells us you run an art gallery. We must compare notes. I sit on the board at SF MoMA. Small operation, I managed. Very boutique. And how do you find our California weather after Chicago's notorious winds? Diana asked. I scrambled to remember if Chicago was experiencing any particular weather patterns that might make the news. A welcome change, I said vaguely. Diana turned to Michael or James, or whoever my son was pretending to be. James, we actually stopped by to remind you about the investment group dinner tomorrow night. The partners are very eager to hear more about your fund's performance this quarter. Those returns you mentioned were most impressive. Investment group, I couldn't help asking. Michael laughed, a sound that bore no resemblance to his real laugh. Aunt Carol doesn't approve of my career change. She thinks I should have stayed in academic research. William clapped Michael on the shoulder. With returns like his, I'd say he made the right choice. 28% growth in this market, extraordinary. I smiled weakly, watching my son transform before my eyes into this character named James Whitmore, investment prodigy. He spoke confidently about market sectors and arbitrage opportunities, using terminology I had never heard from him before. When the couple finally left with promises of dinner invitations and gallery visits, Michael closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. Thank you, he said, for lying to your neighbors, for pretending I'm not your mother. My voice rose, despite my efforts to stay calm. Michael, what is going on? Who is James Whitmore? It's a professional persona, he said defensively. Look, the tech industry wasn't working out the way I hoped. I pivoted. To what? Pretending to be someone else. To investment management. I found a niche. And that requires changing your name and lying about your family. In this world, pedigree matters. No one takes financial advice from Michael Lawson, son of a single mom from Boston. But James Whitmore, from a Connecticut banking family, people line up to invest with him. I shook my head, unable to reconcile this stranger with my son. Where did you get the money for this house? For those clothes? The truth, Michael. I told you, investments paid off. Stop lying to me, I said firmly. I raised you better than this. Something hardened in his expression. Did you? You raised me to work twice as hard for half as much, to play by rules designed to keep people like us in our place. I decided to write new rules. His words felt like a slap. Before I could respond, I noticed a bank statement on the side table, partially visible beneath a magazine. The name printed at the top wasn't Michael Lawson or even James Whitmore. It was Alexander Bennett. "And who is Alexander Bennett?" I asked, pointing to the paper. Michael snatched it up, shoving it into a drawer. "Nobody. An old roommate's mail delivered by mistake." But I had seen enough. The balance visible on that statement had 7 figures. I felt suddenly exhausted, the time change and emotional whiplash catching up with me all at once. "I think I need to lie down," I said quietly. Michael's expression softened with what seemed like genuine concern. "Of course. Let me get the den ready for you." As he arranged sheets on the sofa bed, I wondered what other secrets this house contained, and how well I really knew my own son. I pretended to fall asleep quickly, but rest was impossible. After Michael retreated upstairs, I lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of this mansion. Somewhere, water dripped from an expensive faucet. Outside, the automatic sprinkler system clicked on, watering the perfect lawn. Everything in this house seemed to whisper of wealth and deception. Around midnight, I heard Michael moving around upstairs. His footsteps crossed the landing, followed by the soft closing of a door. When silence settled over the house again, I slipped off the sofa bed and began to explore. The kitchen gleamed in the moonlight, streaming through uncurtained windows. I opened drawers carefully, finding them stocked with high-end cookware that looked unused. The refrigerator contained catering containers rather than home-cooked meals. My son had never shown any interest in cooking, but James Whitmore apparently entertained frequently. In the study, where I had seen the photograph earlier, I turned on a small desk lamp and began a more thorough investigation. The laptop was password protected, of course, but Michael had never been good at hiding things from me. I tried his childhood pet's name, his first school, and finally his birth date backwards. The screen unlocked. My heart pounded as I clicked through files. Most were spreadsheets filled with names and numbers that meant little to me. Then I found a folder labeled Targets, containing detailed profiles of wealthy individuals throughout the Bay Area. Each profile included estimated net worth, personal interests, potential vulnerabilities, and notes about how to approach them. William and Diana from next door were listed with a note, invested 2.4M, ready for Phase 2 upsell. An email program was open, showing correspondence with someone named Ryan. The most recent message read, "Exit strategy accelerated. Extracting final investments next week. Tickets and documents secured." Attached was a travel itinerary to Argentina, one way. In another drawer, I found a stack of business cards with different names. Michael Lawson, James Whitmore, Alexander Bennett, Thomas Harrington, each with different company names and credentials. My hands shaking, I continued searching. Behind a false panel in the bookcase that my fingers discovered by accident, I found a metal box containing multiple passports and driver's licenses, each bearing my son's photo with different names, bundles of cash in various currencies, several expensive watches, and small jewelry items likely easily convertible to cash. On a hunch, I searched for news articles about investment fraud in the Bay Area. Nothing recent appeared. I expanded my search nationwide and found what I feared, reports from Chicago, Seattle, and Miami about a charming young investment manager who disappeared after collecting millions from clients. The physical descriptions varied slightly, but could all fit Michael with minor changes to hair color or style. The final piece fell into place when I discovered a notebook hidden inside a hollowed-out book. Inside were handwritten calculations of amounts collected from various clients and a timeline for disappearing. The total at the bottom exceeded $20 million. I sat on the floor of the study, surrounded by evidence of my son's crimes, and felt physically ill. The boy I had raised, sacrificed for loved unconditionally, had become a sophisticated con artist. Each of those numbers represented someone's savings, perhaps their retirement, or their children's education funds. Real people who trusted him. How had this happened? Had I missed warning signs during his childhood? Was there a fundamental flaw in him that I had been blind to? Or had I somehow failed as a mother, not instilling the values I thought I had? As I sat wrestling with these questions, a floorboard creaked behind me. I turned to find Michael standing in the doorway, his face unreadable in the dim light. "I knew you'd snoop," he said quietly. "You never could help yourself." I stood up slowly, papers still clutched in my hand. "And you never could help lying. Even as a child, you lied, when the truth would have served you better." "What truth?" he asked bitterly. "That we were poor, that my father died and left us with nothing, that my brilliant mind was wasted because we couldn't afford the right schools, the right connections. We managed," I said. "You went to Stanford. On scholarship with student loans I'm still paying off," he countered. "Do you know what happened after graduation? My classmates with family connections walked into six-figure jobs. I had to fight for an entry-level position, coding for people half as smart as me. So you decided to steal instead." I decided to take what should have been mine all along. In that moment, I didn't recognize the man before me. This wasn't my Michael. This was someone consumed by entitlement and resentment. "Those people you stole from," I said, indicating the files. "What did they do to deserve this?" "They were born lucky," he said with a shrug. "They can afford the loss. $20 million, Michael. That's not borrowing or bending rules. That's destruction." "It's redistribution," he corrected. "And it's more like 30 million now." I felt dizzy. "Those are people's life savings. Rich people's excess," he countered. "No one's going hungry." "You don't know that," I whispered. "You don't know whose college fund or medical treatment you just stole." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Then it hardened again. "It's too late for moralizing, Mom. What's done is done." "Then turn yourself in," I pleaded. "Make it right before it gets worse." He laughed, a cold sound that chilled me. "Turn myself in. I'm 2 weeks away from complete financial freedom. Next month, I'll be living in a villa in Argentina. No extradition." "And what about me?" I asked. "What happens to me when all these people realize they've been robbed, when the FBI comes looking? Did you think about that?" "You'll be fine," he said dismissively. "You didn't know anything." "I know now," I pointed out. "Does that make me an accomplice?" Michael studied me for a long moment. "Not if you join me. There's a ticket for you, too. We could have a good life, Mom. Everything you worked for, but never got. You deserve it." The offer hung in the air between us. For a shameful moment, I imagined it. A life of comfort after decades of struggle. No more double shifts or worrying about retirement. Then, I thought of the people in those files. People whose trust my son had betrayed, just as he was now betraying mine. "I can't be part of this," I said finally. His expression darkened. "Then I'm afraid you can't leave." "What are you saying?" "You know too much now. I can't risk it." Fear crawled up my spine as I realized the full extent of what Michael had become. Not just a thief, but someone capable of threatening his own mother. "You won't hurt me," I said, hoping it was true. "I know you won't." "I don't want to," he agreed. "But I've come too far to lose everything now. We'll figure something out in the morning. For now, you'll stay in the guest room upstairs where I can lock the door. You're going to imprison your own mother, just until I decide what to do," he said, gesturing toward the door. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." As he escorted me upstairs, I realized with perfect clarity that I no longer knew this man at all. Somewhere along the way, my son had been replaced by this cold stranger who valued money above all else, including family. The guest room was luxurious, but felt like a cell as I heard the key turn in the lock from outside. I sat on the edge of the bed, tears finally breaking free as the full weight of the situation crashed down on me. Not only had I lost my son to greed and deception, but I was now trapped in a nightmare of his making. Through my tears, I noticed the bathroom door was ajar. A small window above the shower might be big enough for me to fit through. I had never been more grateful for my small frame as I stood on the edge of the tub and tested the window. It opened. I had a decision to make. The mother in me wanted to save my son, to somehow pull him back from this abyss. But the woman who had raised him to know right from wrong knew what had to be done. With shaking hands, I took out my cell phone and dialed 911. "What are you doing?" Michael demanded, his face contorted with anger and betrayal, as the police officers led him through his elegant foyer in handcuffs 3 hours later. Dawn was just breaking, casting long shadows across the marble floors. "Mom, how could you?" I stood with my arms wrapped around myself, watching officers cataloging evidence throughout the house. "How could I not?" I asked quietly. "You gave me no choice." The call to emergency services from the bathroom window had been brief and desperate. I had managed to convey enough information for them to take me seriously, including the existence of multiple identities and the large-scale fraud. When officers arrived, I had directed them to the study and the hidden compartments containing the damning evidence. Michael had been asleep when they entered his bedroom. The shock on his face when he realized what was happening would haunt me forever. "You're my mother," he hissed as they guided him toward the front door. "You're supposed to protect me." "I am protecting you," I replied, "from becoming something worse than you already are." A female detective gently led me to the kitchen, away from my son's accusing glare. "Mrs. Lawson, we need to take your formal statement. You've done the right thing, though I know it doesn't feel that way right now." As I described everything I had discovered, more officers arrived along with FBI agents. The scale of Michael's crimes was becoming apparent. His scheme had stretched across multiple states, involving dozens of victims and complex financial maneuvers. "Your son is very intelligent," one agent commented. "This operation shows remarkable sophistication." "He was always brilliant," I said, my voice breaking. "Just not always good." Throughout that day, I watched my son's false life dismantled piece by piece. Agents boxed up evidence, photographed the house, and took inventory of assets that would eventually be liquidated to repay victims. Neighbors gathered on the street, whispering behind their hands as word spread about James Whitmore's true identity. Diana and William, the couple from next door, arrived looking shell-shocked. When they saw me sitting on a police car's bumper, wrapped in a blanket, recognition dawned. "You're not his aunt," Diana said accusingly. "No," I admitted. "I'm his mother. He stole our retirement fund," William said, his voice hollow. $2.4 million. Everything we had. The number hit me like a physical blow. It was no longer an abstract figure in a spreadsheet, but a real sum representing real harm. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "Did you know?" Diana demanded. Were you part of this? No, the detective interrupted, stepping between us. Mrs. Lawson is the one who alerted authorities. She's been cooperating fully. Their anger deflated, replaced by confusion. You turned in your own son? William asked. I had to, I said simply. As more victims were identified and contacted, I heard similar stories repeated throughout the day. Retired couples who had invested their life savings, widows who had trusted their late husband's insurance payouts to the charming young financial advisor, successful professionals who believed they were securing their children's futures. The total amount exceeded $35 million, much of it already moved offshore or converted to untraceable assets. What remained in accounts under various names was frozen, but would cover only a fraction of what had been stolen. That evening, I was permitted to see Michael before they transferred him to a federal detention facility. He sat in an interview room, still in his expensive clothes, though his carefully styled appearance had deteriorated throughout the day. When I entered, he didn't look up. I brought you into this world, I said, softly, sitting across from him. Everything I did was to give you a good life. Honest, meaningful, true. Where did I go wrong? He finally raised his eyes to mine. You taught me that hard work leads to success. But it doesn't, Mom. Not in America. Not anymore. I watched you break your back for decades. And what did you get? A tiny condo and arthritis. I got you, I said. I got to raise a son I was proud of. Or so I thought. I was tired of being hungry, he said, his voice suddenly younger, vulnerable. Not for food, but for everything else. Opportunities, respect, power, things you can only get with money in this world. There are honest ways to succeed. Not fast enough, he snapped. Not big enough. I wanted more than scraps from the table. And now you'll have nothing, I said, my heart breaking. Was it worth it? He had no answer for that. Before I left, I placed my hand on the table, between us, not touching him, but offering a connection. I'll visit you. However long the sentence, I'll be there. Why? He asked bitterly. I'm dead to you now. No, Michael, never that. I hate what you've done, but you are still my son. Always. As they led him away, I saw a flicker of the little boy he once was in his eyes. Just a flicker, but enough to cling to in the dark days ahead. The legal process that followed was grueling. I testified at hearings, in the eventual trial, describing how I discovered the fraud. I sat through victim impact statements, each one a knife to my heart, as people described the devastation Michael had caused. Some had lost homes. Others had postponed critical medical treatments when their funds vanished. A father wept as he explained that his disabled daughter's care facility could no longer be paid for. I emptied my retirement account, sold my condo, and liquidated every asset I had to contribute to the Victim Restitution Fund. It was nowhere near enough, but it was all I could do. Some victims spat at me outside the courthouse. Others recognized the depth of my own loss and offered unexpected compassion. You raised him, but you didn't make his choices, one elderly woman told me, squeezing my hand after particularly difficult testimony. My son died of a drug overdose. I know what it is to love someone who loses their way. Michael received a 15-year federal prison sentence. The judge cited the calculated nature of the crimes, the significant financial harm to victims, and the absence of genuine remorse. I watched my son being led away in shackles, his expensive suit replaced by prison orange, and felt my heart shatter completely. Afterward, with nowhere to go, I moved into a small apartment provided by a victims advocacy group. I found work as an administrative assistant, again starting over at 67. The irony wasn't lost on me. My entire life had been a circle, ending where it began. But humans are resilient, even when broken. I joined a support group for families of white-collar criminals. I met parents, spouses, and children struggling with the same questions that haunted me. How did we not know? What could we have done differently? How do we go on loving someone who has caused such harm? There were no easy answers, but there was solidarity in our shared pain. I began volunteering with financial literacy programs, speaking to young people about ethics and the consequences of dishonesty. My story became a cautionary tale, one I shared despite the shame it brought me. 6 months after Michael's sentencing, I received permission to visit him. The prison was cold and sterile, the visitation room crowded with other families, trying to maintain connections across barriers, both physical and emotional. When Michael was brought in, he looked thinner, paler. Prison had stripped away his confident facade. He sat across from me at the small table, hands fidgeting. "You came," he said, sounding surprised. "I told you I would." We sat in awkward silence for a moment. "How are you?" I finally asked. "Alive," he answered. "Surviving. You, the same." Another silence stretched between us. "I've been thinking about what you said," he admitted eventually. "About whether it was worth it. It wasn't. Not just getting caught, but all of it." He swallowed hard. "I keep seeing their faces, the people at the trial. I never thought about them as real people before." It was a small admission, hardly adequate, given the scale of harm he had caused, but it was something, a tiny seed that might, with time and nurturing, grow into genuine remorse. "That's a start, Michael. I can never fix this," he said, gesturing helplessly. "I can't give back what I took." "No," I agreed. "But you can choose who you become now, even here. Especially here." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry, Mom. Not just for what I did to them, but what I did to you. I betrayed everything you taught me." Tears filled my eyes as I reached across the table to touch his hand briefly, before the guard warned against contact. "We have a long road ahead," I told him, "but we'll walk it together." 2 years have passed since that first prison visit. Michael has begun counseling, participating in restorative justice programs, where he speaks with surrogates representing his victims. He's using his mathematical skills to help other inmates prepare for GED exams. Small steps toward redemption, though the debt he owes society can never fully be repaid. I visit monthly, watching for signs of the compassionate boy I once knew. Sometimes I see glimpses of him. Other times, I wonder if my hope blinds me to a darker truth about his nature. As for me, I've found unexpected purpose in my new life. I speak at colleges about ethical decision-making. I volunteer with fraud victims, helping them navigate the complex emotions of betrayal and loss. I've even testified before state legislators about strengthening investor protections. The pain never fully disappears, but it changes shape, becomes something I can carry without being crushed beneath it. I've learned that love doesn't require approval or even trust. Sometimes, love is simply refusing to abandon someone, even when they've lost their way completely. Last month, I received a letter from one of Michael's victims, an elderly man who lost half his savings to my son's scheme. He wrote that he had been consumed by anger until he saw me at a victim support meeting, visibly carrying my own burden of grief and responsibility. "I realized then that there were many victims of your son's crimes," he wrote, "including you. I want you to know I forgive him, not for his sake, but for mine. And I want you to forgive yourself." His words were a balm to my wounded soul. Perhaps there is healing possible, even from the deepest betrayals, not through forgetting or minimizing the harm, but through the hard work of accountability, amends, and moving forward with greater wisdom. I don't know what the future holds for Michael or for me. I only know that the greatest act of love I ever showed my son was refusing to shield him from the consequences of his actions. By turning him in, I gave him his only chance at reclaiming his humanity. Sometimes, the most loving thing we can do for someone is to let them fall to face the truth of what they've done, to begin the painful process of rebuilding from ruins of their own making. I flew across the country, expecting to celebrate my son's success. Instead, I found myself on a journey through heartbreak and betrayal to a destination I never imagined. A place of hard-won wisdom that love without truth is not love at all, but merely indulgence. That enabling wrong to protect someone we love ultimately destroys them more surely than any punishment. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between protecting someone you love and doing what you know is right? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might be struggling with loving someone who has lost their way. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes our most painful choices lead to our greatest healing.